Don't let the title of this video give you a false impression. I'm blessed beyond measure to enjoy anytime I get in the outdoors, especially when I'm bow hunting with my friends. And creating videos like this is another great thing about my passion for the outdoors. Today's video, we'll get into the swing of the rut in Indiana, bow hunting. And the title of this video is called The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. The good, the things that went right, the things that were great. The bad, the things that weren't in my favor, didn't go so well. And the ugly, the things that make you want to facepalm yourself as a bow hunter. My name is John, this is my channel. We look for adventure, travel extensively, enjoy the great outdoors, eat good food, and look for cool experiences. If you're into any of that, subscribe to the channel and I'll be sharing content as I'm able. If you haven't seen the first video in this series, go back and watch it because that sets up the trip getting from Texas to Indiana and the challenges there, things that went right, things that went wrong. In this video, we'll focus on the main portion of the trip, which was filled with rut-tastic deer activity. I saw more deer in one day than I've ever seen in my entire life. I've seen more deer in that one day than I probably have in many of the seasons that I've hunted. I experienced all the sights and the sounds of a true whitetail rut and had some awesome opportunities. So let's look at the good. Going into the next days of the hunt, the rut began and it's set up for some great deer activity. I was hunting in a location between food and a bedding area and in a stand that I parked myself in for the majority of the time that I was in Indiana hunting. This stand was something that a whitetail hunter couldn't dream of in his wildest dreams. It had everything. Also a testament to the gentleman that built this deer habitat because you could tell all things were considered and great thought was put into the placement of this stand and the results that came from it. The name of the stand was Coffin Corner. How cool is that? I know, right? It had bedding directly in front of me and then had two roads or a road that kind of came around two sides. The one side had a ravine that went off into a hardwood bottom. The other side was kind of a staging area and was in the direction towards a cornfield where these deer were feeding. Had roads on either side, bedding in front, had ravines, had an approach in which you walked through a creek bottom and then went up a ridge. The tree that the stand was in was right on the edge of that ridge, and so you came up out of the creek bottom and climbed straight up in the tree, and then you were hunting the bedding area just out in front. November 9th is a day that'll be forever etched into my hunting memory. Not only did I see a deer parade because of the rut, I saw one of the biggest bucks that I've ever laid eyes on in the wild. He was chasing a doe and I heard him crashing through the bedding area, grunting as they were running. Why don't you see that photo of me smiling ear to ear, holding this buck's rack in my hands, describing all the great things that went right for me, claiming my trophy? I'll explain that and a few other conditions in the next segment, the bad. So let's talk about the bad, the things that weren't in my favor and things that as a bow hunter didn't go so well. Bad number one, the weather for this rut and this time of the year had an average of the highs being in the mid 70s. As a whitetail hunter, warmer weather is not good. And for this part of the world, I know that mid 70s in the first 2 weeks of November, not really that common. As a deer hunter, we dream of that frost-laden morning that's crisp and has the deer up and on their feet moving around. Not the case for us this week, but we did have one morning that got down into the upper 30s. The rest of the time, the high temperatures were in like the high 60s to mid 70s. I wasn't sweating like the opening of bow season in Texas where it's 100 degrees and 100% humidity, but it still wasn't what I expected.
There's a front moving through. It is about 74 degrees and the wind has been howling. 25-mile-an-hour gusts. I had about 5 deer roll through this morning, but it's so windy I don't know if we're going to see much action today or not. I was chasing most of the day yesterday. So we can sit all day and partake in that, but you can see the wind is just whipping. Tough it out as long as we can. See how we do.
I'll qualify this by saying when the rut starts, the rut starts. And when we were there, it probably could have been 95 degrees and the rut still would have started. Still saw more deer than I ever saw in my entire life, and I still had some great experiences. It was just kind of a bad deal with the weather. Bad number two, I did not bring rattling horns or a decoy with me on this trip. Huge mistake, I know. If there's ever a time a white-tailed deer will utilize all of their senses and all of the ways to communicate, it's the rut. Bucks are fueled by aggression and a fatal desire to procreate and are searching nonstop for something to fight or something to procreate with. Bad number three, lack of confidence. As a bow hunter, confidence plays a huge part in how successful you'll be. Being able to run all these mental checks quickly and pull the release and send an arrow down range and into successful shot placement is something that's really vital. And you can only do that if you're confident about everything that goes into that. I can shoot well, but on this trip, I did not have the confidence of some of the things that I should have to make that successful shot placement. I also did not have the confidence I needed to reach out over 40 yards and take a shot at a buck that I should have. Coupled with that, I didn't have the confidence of being able to call deer in this part of the country in the rut. It's definitely very different in Indiana than it is in Texas. In Texas, it's more of a, I guess, it's the deer are really skittish, and so calling and rattling and all these different things aren't widely done in most of the hunting scenarios that I'm a part of here. I'm about to change that, of course, after experiencing all this, but in the past, I haven't used that all that often. Just been some still hunting and then kind of trying to place myself in an area where I think deer are going to travel and then, intercept them. I did not have an effective calling or rattling sequence, and I could tell by the way that the deer responded or didn't respond early on in some of the earlier sits of the hunt. I got some coaching from some friends of mine that were there hunting and some guys that had hunted in Indiana, all their lives, and that helped. Also figured out some things pretty quickly on my own, but I lost over half of the hunt, on trial and error. Also lost, I think, a great deal of my success because I wasn't ready upstairs mentally with confidence. Now let's talk ugly. U-G-L-Y. I ain't got no alibi. It was ugly. Ugly number one. Remember when I said I didn't have the confidence as a deer caller and my deer calling ability? On the infamous day of November 9th, when that buck was chasing that doe, crashing through that bedding area and grunted, I knew that he was communicating with this doe, and I knew the doe was going to come out of the bedding area and then he was going to be hot on her heels. Like clockwork, doe busted out, hopped across the road, couple seconds, buck popped out, I grunted, and he stopped, wheeled his head around. Great, right? Yeah, great. I could tell by the way that this deer stopped and his body posture and everything that it freaked him out. Well, because he was so large and because I grunted and stopped him, I also freaked out. There we were, both freaked out. So after a couple of seconds of being freaked out, he wheels around and goes to jump into the bedding area, and what do? I snort wheeze. And then he kicks it into high gear and runs away out of my life forever. I wanted to swan dive off of my lock-on into the dirt face first. I should have let that deer make it out of the roadway and behind some brush or some cover or something before calling to him. In doing so, he couldn't pinpoint my location exactly, and he probably wouldn't have been as freaked out because he wouldn't have been exposed out in the open. If I had grunted a little bit lighter also, it probably would have given him some curiosity or maybe an opportunity to try to circle around and find the rival buck or where the sound was coming from. I'll never know because I made the ugly, then the deer ran away. Ugly number two, buck fever. It is real. I walked you through the big buck scenario that happened. I probably had 4 or 5 more encounters with bucks on this trip, and it was only towards the latter part of the trip that I started getting my act together and calming down and not being so affected by the sight of deer first, but also nice deer. I love this. I love deer hunting. I love bow hunting and everything about it. And so seeing a deer, has an effect on me, and it has an effect on, most people that do this and enjoy it. The only way that I was able to kind of get past that was to have the scenarios over and over again of seeing multiple deer and then, figuring out they didn't smell me, they didn't hear me, they can't see me, they don't know I'm here. And so as more deer started coming out and kind of moving around, I could move more confidently myself knowing that I was undetected. I had a really nice 9-point that came out of the bedding area, walked out, I made some calls to him, he circled around. Because of the buck fever, didn't hit the record button on my camera, didn't get set up, and so I'm going through all this and I didn't even capture this nice encounter on film. Jelly legs, check. Erratic breathing, check. Bad decisions, check. It took me many times of going through this before I could figure out how to get my act together and then overcome it. When I did, I could definitely tell by the quality of the footage that I was able to capture, but also too the types of encounters that I had the rest of the trip. Had I, overcame buck fever earlier in the trip, I probably would have made some better decisions and done some things differently and ended up, having that pose with those deer antlers in my hands. Ugly number 3. We'll call this one fugly. Freaking ugly. So this 9-point rolls up on me like a ninja out of a bedding area, and he was in front of me before I could even know. Not true. He did come out of the bedding area, and he was on me before I didn't know, but I was on Instagram on my phone because I'd gotten bored because there wasn't constant deer action. Happens to all of us, I'm sure. So anyway, this deer comes out of the trail on the bedding area. I'd seen deer coming in and out of this trail before, and I'd ranged it. It was 42 yards. Deer steps out into the roadway. I make the decision to draw the bow back, get ready to let an arrow fly. Got my pins right, got my sights right, everything's right. Hit the release button. Arrow sails, lighted nock, majestic flight into the twilight of the evening, and goes right under the deer's front quarters, into the dirt. Deer spooked, jumped up, kind of trotted around, but didn't run away. He didn't really know what happened. I was so bummed. Also wanted to do the swan dive off into the dirt. I also wanted to take my bow and hurl it like a discus as far as I could, but I didn't. I grabbed my grunt call and I ended up grunting at this deer the right way, and he ended up circling out about 100 yards and making a big wide circle to the edge of the ridge, and he couldn't get quite behind me, and so he followed that ridge all the way back up he was at almost 50 yards. Had he gotten to about 40 yards and given me a broadside opportunity, I probably would have been confident enough to shoot at him. But some other things happened, and he ended up kind of spooking and then jumping off the ridge and then going away, unfortunately. Not the outcome I hoped for, but it was cool to have that encounter with that deer and to kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together to figure out a calling sequence that made this deer curious enough to circle around and try to figure out, where that rival buck was. Well, that's the end of the video today. Hope you found this video helpful. I did. Almost therapeutic. Not really. I did not. Had a great trip though. There's still more footage to come, so stay tuned. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. If you want to see more of my videos, hit that subscribe button. If you only made it to the end of this video out of morbid curiosity, almost like watching a train wreck happen, hit that search bar and look for something that strikes your fancy.